Hey, there's no need to stress. Here's a teacher tip in 5 minutes or less. I'm Educator Barnes, and today we're going to talk about a strategy called Tell Your Neighbor. Now, when I was a kid, I grew up in a missionary Baptist church, and that church was attended by predominantly people who identified as Black. And in those type of churches, there is this thing called call and response. It's very interactive. So I have a lot of friends who are Catholic. When I go to mass, it is very regimented. There is no speaking back to the pastor in church. That's just not a thing that you do. But in Baptist church, it's very interactive. And there's a lot of things I have taken from those interactive sermons and applied it to my classroom. So I started teaching actually in the church. So I was a Sunday school teacher, a vacation Bible school teacher, and I used some of those things just naturally because we're in a church setting. And I'm like, I can use this in the classroom. So one of the things that I remember from my childhood church was the whole tell your neighbor. So the pastor will be talking about something, he's talking for a while, right? And as much as possible, you're trying to focus on what the guy is saying because it's really super important. And I need to apply this to my life during this week. And you just kind of start zoning out. And then the pastor will say something like, tell your neighbor. And so he would say neighbor, and you would turn and say neighbor, he got you. And so you may say he got you, or whatever the phrase is. And then I am like, how can I flip that script and apply it to my class? So in the classroom, if I know there's a lesson I'm doing that's a lot of teacher talk, I want to break that up to make sure my students have interaction with each other because that gives me some stopping points and allows them to check in. So sometimes I'll do things like, hey, point to your neighbor, and I have them point to each other, and I may have them repeat the last thing that I said. So it may be like a simile is a comparison using like or as. And I'll say, point to your neighbor and say, a simile is a comparison using like or as. And they'll turn and say, a simile is a comparison using like or as. And so I'm having them actively repeat, but that active repeating of what I just said or what I'm teaching allows them another opportunity to internalize that information. If we're finishing an activity, I like to use the word positive gamut, which I learned from Kagan strategies. And by this time in the school year, we've learned different gamuts. So, thank you. Thanks for the information. I appreciate working with you. And so I may say, turn and give a positive gamut. So they'll turn and give a positive gamut. But the whole point is to be interactive. Or I may ask an open-ended question, and I may say something like, put your hand up with this you've ever experienced this. And just like when I was in church as a kid, the pastor would say things. Has this happened to you? Or one of the things he used to say, if I stub your toe, say ouch. So that means if it applies to you, verbalize and say something. So I would come up with these different phrases in the classroom to keep it interactive throughout. And I would do this at times when I knew the teacher talk was going to be heavy, but I needed to get this information out there. That's one way to keep students engaged. By letting them be interactive, and it's really easy to bring them back, especially if you have them say something they're repeating, then you come in and go to the next step. Or if you ask them to recount directions, because sometimes I'll use this with directions. So I may go over what we're about to do, and I'll say, hey, turn to your neighbor and explain what we're doing right now. They turn to the neighbor, explain what they're doing, and then I may say, hey, who can explain it to the whole class? Have somebody explain it to the whole class, and then I come at, so now we're at the fourth time because I've explained it. They explained it to their neighbor. I've had someone explain it to the class. Now I explained it, and then of course I'm gonna have it written on somewhere, the projector on the board. So now there's 5 opportunities for you to know what is going on. But it helps kids be interactive because when you're thinking about school, you want to balance that teacher talk and that student talk. So that's my teacher tip for the day. Stay tuned for the next one.